Hi, everyone. It's Margaret Manning here with lifeafterdeath.com. We are a community of people who have a fascination for the topic of life after death, spirituality, and topics like near-death experience, reincarnation, and also the fear of death. And we interview experts and have conversations about these topics with an open mind and try to keep it fair and non-judgmental. Now, my guest today is Ken Ross. Now, Ken is the son of Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, who, as you know, was a pioneer when it came to hospices and this conversation around death and dying. Her book on death and dying has been a bestseller around the world for years, celebrating its 50th year anniversary this year. So, Ken, I'm really happy to have you here as representing your mother and also the EKR Foundation, which you are responsible for. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you here. We've done a couple of other conversations about the work of your mother and the impact, that she had on the world and on so many millions of people. But as I mentioned in the introduction, we've a lot of people in our community who are fascinated by this topic because they're afraid of it. They're terrified of death. They don't know how to handle it, how to have a, conversation with themselves. So could we talk about a little bit about how your mother would address that fear of death and what she would say to a dying patient or family?
Sure. My mother's basic premise is that, unfortunately, as society is so-called developed, we've moved into cities and we've developed these big hospitals and we rely on technology. Yeah. And the problem is that back in the old days, death was a part of life. Someone dies, your grandmother dies in a house, you see it, it's part of your growing up. Yeah. And, it's just a part of life. I mean, you see it in front of you, but the problem is now that people die in hospitals. We hide death, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to see it. And it's not a part of our upbringing. And she said, unfortunately, as we've developed, we've kind of regressed at the same time. My mother was a country doctor. And so back in rural Switzerland, died at home. Her own father, she kidnapped out of the hospital window so that he could die at home.
Are you kidding me? Did she do that?
Yeah, back in 1960, before hospice, her and sisters kidnapped their father out of the hospital window, took him home. In the last few days, they all sat around a piano singing. He got to drink his favorite wines. He had a beautiful death, so that was
I didn't know that.
And so, she said the problem is, like here, there's visiting hours. Children are not allowed to go into hospitals when she was, doing her work. It's ridiculous. I mean, the more we hide death, the more we're going to be afraid of it. We've got to talk about it now. And there's great things happening now. We have the death cafes, death over dinner, all sorts of things happening. But it's 50 years later. I mean, we're still like, it's like a big deal to have a death over dinner. It's nice, but it's kind of sad that it's taken half a century to get to this point. And so we've got to talk about death, got to make it part of our lives. I mean, face it now.
I think you're right, actually, about that. And she, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's just, have a living will. Tell your family what you want done with your body, take care of your paperwork. And she said, the problem is the people who don't face death are the ones who are afraid of it. She said the people who don't live fully are the ones afraid of it because they've wasted their lives. If we talk about it now, we embrace it, we live our lives fully, we get rid of our unfinished business. When we get to the end, there's nothing to fear because we lived every day right.
Well, you're definitely living your life right. And we're talking about, you're obviously in the middle of all this conversation about death and dying with your mother's legacy and all her publications. You are traveling the world and living your life with joy. And I think you're right. The one point about being afraid of death if you're afraid of life. And I think taking her father out of the hospital window, that's living life, right? That's taking.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Take charge. I mean, don't be the engine, don't be the caboose, So.
That's incredible. So when she sat down with patients and family, I mean, what were like you said, I mean, would she actually say, take care of unfinished business, or is there anything that I can do to communicate something to someone? I mean, what was the conversation? Do you happen to know from all the writing what the conversations were that she would have?
Well, she said, basically, the most important thing is listening. So a lot of doctors just talk, or they project their religious beliefs or whatever it is. What we have to do is listen to the patient, because everyone's in a different position. Everyone's culturally different, educationally different, different experiences. So, every death is unique. Grief is unique, despite what people say. It's not cookie cutter. I mean, you can't just slap on certain things, to kind of progress a patient through their dying.
Yeah.
You got to sit down and listen to the patient. Where are they? Are they ready to talk about it? Do they want to talk about it using symbolic language, nonverbal language? Some people they'll be talking about it, but if you're not listening, you're not hearing that they're actually talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, my mother had a friend of hers who one day came up to her and said, "I want you to have my cane." So my mother was shocked because this person needed a cane to go to the bathroom, needed a cane for everything. And what she realized was this was symbolic, nonverbal language. I know I'm dying. I want you to have my cane. It'll remind you of my life. And sure enough, the next day, the patient died. So that was listening to the patient, not just with words, listening with your heart, with your soul, listening to their language, whether it's verbal or not. You got to listen to all the little clues.
I know that she wrote a book, didn't she, on children and death, and talked about using pictures with children.
Yeah. My mother loved drawing interpretation. She had a colleague, Greg Firth, who wrote a book, The Secret World of Drawings. And, she did this with my sister and I often. So, she'd take a look at the photograph, the painting rather, and, she'd break it up into quadrants, and each quadrant represented something else. But drawing interpretation was a very important part of my mother's work, because she said often children don't have the words, but they have the knowledge, but they express it in different ways.
Yeah. I remember once she told me that she had a picture of a tiny girl had a stick figure holding a stop sign. Mm-hmm. And that was just she felt overwhelmed by something that, she just wanted it to stop. And it's just, but if you're not paying attention, you would have missed that maybe. Oh, isn't that a cute little girl with a stop sign? You wouldn't have read into it. The important. So I guess it's, listening, watching for symbolic language. I guess, did she have a lot of difficulty with family saying they don't want to talk about it, or I don't have that conversation, they're not ready yet, like talking for the patient?
Right. She said the problem with patients is that you're often not just dealing with the patient, dealing with a family. Mm-hmm. Often different people in the family are at different stages of acceptance. Yeah. And the problem is, if you have one person accepting it and the other person denying it, you got to bridge that chasm, because, you're going to either bring the patient back to being in denial, or it's just not going to work. So you have to work on everyone who's a part of that dying process. Otherwise, it's going to create a lot of tension. So
how does she do that? Does she prioritize the patient first, or presumably, and then the family? Or because in some ways the family can be a block. It's like a husband, for example, who doesn't want his wife to die, and so he's not going to let anybody talk to her about that.
Right. Well, I think what she obviously focused on the patient, but she always focused also on the person who was kind of furthest behind in the process, because she knew that person was going to cause the most trouble. Yeah. So she would absolutely focus on everyone involved, especially the last person in that train. So.
I watched a video with her. I'm sure it's one of the famous ones about she's talking to a lady who is unable to speak. She's very difficult speaking. And so Elisabeth is very, very close to her, like physically listening to her and talking, asking her questions, and then turning to the daughter or some relative who's right behind her and asking for interpretation, because the daughter or the sister or friend knew her. But I just thought that was a beautiful
way. And in the video, you notice my mother is in the bed, right? I mean,
she actually is,
do not get emotionally involved. Don't sit on the bed. My mother's like, that's BS. She said a little bit more rude. Yeah. But, my mother said, yes, get involved with the patient. Get emotionally attached. What's wrong with that? I mean, if you keep yourself held back, the patient's going to smell that. That's what she said. She said, you got to get involved. I mean, the patient's going to smell your fear of dying. You got to take care of your own unfinished business before you can work with these patients. Otherwise, you're going to do this. How can you help people to die when you can't face your own death?
Yeah, I mean, that actually, we're talking about the conversations that she might have with a dying patient, or with family. It seems to me that, what one thing she's saying right up front is the fear of death is in your hands. I mean, you have it in your control, and that you're not going anywhere forward unless you start with that. So, did you remember she did these life, death, and transition workshops? Are you doing anything like that? Any conferences or workshops that follow her that stage of coming to grips with the baseline fear of death?
We are not doing them through the foundation, but my mother's former staff is doing them.
Oh, okay.
I think the website is the externalizationworkshops.com. And there's many, many people still doing it around the country and doing it, I think I've seen in Europe. Actually, our group in Japan does do those workshops in Tokyo. And, I think they're still doing them in New Zealand, Australia. And the workshop leader, Larry Lincoln, keeps saying he's retiring. And every time he says he's retiring, I go on the website and see he's getting more workshops. So he just keeps getting pulled back in. And he just did a book on the workshops.
Okay.
Take a look, Larry Lincoln.
Okay.
And he's got a wonderful new book on his experience doing the workshops over the last couple of decades.
I'm going to make a note of that. And the website was called
externalizationworkshops.com.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. No, I mean, this is the thing that is so powerful, is that your mother she was a small person, like physically. She wasn't, but she was a tiger, and she was just so, look at 50 years and how many people are still talking about her and call her the death and dying lady. And it just doesn't matter. It's just they're talking about a topic that no one wanted to talk about.
Right. Yeah. I get these Google alerts, and I think yesterday there was 13 different references to my mother. There's 2 musicians who just did their albums based on my mother's beliefs. There's a play based on my mother's beliefs. There's a cartoon. Someone just did a play. It's just incredible. It just continues everywhere in the world. I'm on planes and I see my mother's 5 stages used in movies. Like I saw 2 last month I had never heard of. So, and someone just named their band Kübler-Ross in Sweden. So that's kind of funny too.
That must feel good, though. Do you tell her this? I mean, I'm assuming that you feel that her presence is still somewhere near you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's just, she's all over the place, and I definitely feel she's kind of giving me a hand to develop the foundation.
Well, you've done a great job. Honestly, Ken, I can't thank you enough for sharing this with our community. Go out to ekrfoundation.org. This is the website for the Elisabeth Kübler-Ross Foundation. And keep us up to date, because we can update, maybe talk again when I think Stanford is taking over the archive of all her materials to produce some new books. Would you want to tell us a bit about that? And
I find I have this thing where when I book one-way tickets, magical things happen. So I went up to San Francisco to see a movie, and the person showing the movie said, well, we're just showing part of the movie tonight. Can you come tomorrow night? So I went the next night, and they announced I was in the audience. It was a movie about palliative care. And somebody came up to me after the movie and said, oh, would you like to join me for dinner? And it was one of the head palliative care physicians of Stanford. And so we started talking, and as I'm talking, I'm realizing, hey, Stanford would be a great home for her papers. Everyone in California, I find, is very progressive, and they're really trying to move the whole thing forward, the conversation. And so we talked for a number of months. They sent out 4 people from 4 different departments of Stanford. Yeah. And after about 8 months, we came to an agreement, and I just shipped them the first 52 boxes of my mom's papers.
Wow. That's incredible. Do you think she knew it was all going to be like this? It was all going to be good? Do you think she had faith? I know she had lots of bumps in her life and was just, not accepted by everybody. But do you think she knew in her heart of hearts she was going to have this much of an impact and help the world? Help the world. I mean, let's face it. It's not just few people.
She was a humble person. So, she said, I've done my work. She said, just before she died, she said, Kenneth, if you want to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, live your life and just do whatever feels right. That's what she always said, just do whatever feels right. So
She's magical. Well, look, I want to stay in touch because I really want to know how things go. And I think for our community in particular, this is going to be a big interest to them because she's the shining light. I mean, she is not just the shining light. That makes it sound too romantic. I mean, she was the worker that got this conversation about death and dying and fear of death in the open. So
Right.
I'm sure she'd be happy to know what you've done.
She'd be shocked because I used to be shy and quiet and I never publicly spoke. And so now I'm giving lectures all around the world and I think she'd be quite surprised.
Oh, I think she probably knew something. Mothers have this tendency to know about what their sons are capable of that you don't even know. So
it's true because I was just going through my books and I found a signed book I hadn't noticed before. And it said to my son, Kenneth, who may follow me one day in my work. And that was written in 1985.
Wow. See, she knew.
Yeah,
she knew.
I guess she did.
Well, thank you, Ken. It's really great to talk with you. I appreciate your time and all of your insights and secrets you've told us about your mother, and good luck with all the future plans. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our Life After Death YouTube channel and visit our website at lifeafterdeath.com. We are a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death and subjects like near-death experience, the afterlife, reincarnation, and spirituality. Together, we are exploring and discovering these topics together with curiosity and an open heart.